What is going on, everyone? Darkside Phil here, and welcome to another edition of the Hateful Truth video game review series. And if you're not sure what game we're reviewing today, you are probably blind, because this is the game that actually I've been playing for the past 3 days. It's that long, it had that much content. Actually, to be completely honest, I am very presently surprised, is what I was about to say. Pleasantly surprised with the quality of this game, and we're going to talk a little bit about the highs, a little bit about a couple of the road bumps along the way, and things that I think could have been done a little bit better. But overall, we're going to give maximum truth and minimum bullshit talking about Amazing Spider-Man, the video game. Now, just to start, Amazing Spider-Man was developed by Beenox. Now, if you're not familiar with Beenox, this is the company that developed the past 2 Spider-Man games. One last year in the fall called Edge of Time, and one a year before that called Shattered Dimensions. Now, a lot of people said, Shattered Dimensions was a good game, but it took away the open world aspect of Spider-Man. It was more of a linear game, and a lot of people didn't like that. They loved the fact that Shattered Dimensions had 4 different versions of Spider-Man, did a lot of things original for the first time, but didn't like the fact that Spider-Man was more confined, okay? Then, when Edge of Time came out last fall, a lot of people just kind of lost faith in Beenox and said, I don't know what they're doing with these characters and what they think they're doing with this series. The game was extremely linear, was completely indoors, to which people were just like terrified. Oh my god, this is not Spider-Man. When we think of Spider-Man, we think of him swinging through the streets of New York on webs, going around stopping crimes, saving the citizens of the city, and then, of course, every once in a while going into some kind of an epic battle against one of his classic villains, and so on and so forth. Well, that's pretty much exactly what Amazing Spider-Man does. I think that what we're going to do, we're going to draw a lot of parallels from Amazing Spider-Man to last year's Batman Arkham City. Now, if you remember, if you either watched my playthrough or watched my Hateful Truth game review of Batman Arkham City, you'll remember that I called it the best licensed superhero game ever made. I really felt that on all cylinders, it just hit perfectly, that it understood the characters, it understood the lore of Batman, and the fact that there was so much involved in that game, whether it was the intricate detail of Arkham City and all the locales that you would remember from the movies, from the comics, whether it was the amazingly large cast of characters that were in the game, that were classic characters and true to their characters, the gripping plot and storyline, all the side content in that game nailed the Batman, okay? Amazing Spider-Man very similarly does a lot of the same things that Arkham City did right, and that is an amazingly good thing, because Spider-Man has been waiting for a game like this for a long time, especially after its last 2 outings, where he was kind of like nipped in the butt, you know what I mean? He didn't have free roam, he didn't seem like you were playing Spider-Man. That being said, you do have to understand that Amazing Spider-Man is a movie tie-in game to the Amazing Spider-Man movie that was released this week, and therefore it has a lot of limitations. So let's talk a little bit about this. I'm going to try not to spoil as much as possible, because this game itself, is a spoiler to the movie, okay? Unfortunately, the main plot of this game, from the very beginning, you get 2 major plot points of the Amazing Spider-Man movie that are spoiled. So if you haven't seen the movie and you want to play the game, then you might want to see the movie first if you care about that. If you don't care and you just want to play a good game, then just by all means jump into it. But it's a little weird that this game is set after the movie, directly after the movie, and all the events in this game take place after the movie, and it spoils the major plot points of the movie. So that being said, for 1 second here, I'm going to say spoiler alert. I'm going to talk a little bit about spoilers, and then I'm going to end it, okay? So you just know the plot of the game takes place several months after the movie. Basically, the Lizard, who's the villain of the movie, has been reverted back to Dr. Connors. The problem is, there is an outbreak in the city of people who are getting attacked by these mutant monsters. Basically, Oscorp that Connors was working for, and he made this serum, and the serum turned him into the Lizard, and that was the whole plot of the movie. Well, they manufactured this en masse and started using it on other subjects. So there's subjects like the Rhino, Vermin, this iguana dude whose name I can't remember, but there's several mutants in the game that end up not only being boss monsters for you to fight later, but they're infecting the town of New York. And so the major plot of this game is you're going through New York trying to help people that become infected. You're trying to solve this infection by freeing Dr. Connors from the mental home, or the mental hospital, so that he can help you manufacture a cure. At the same time, the main villain of the game, Alistair Smythe, who still works for Oscorp, and, you know, probably unbeknownst to a lot of them that you know, the higher ups at Oscorp, he's basically got plans to use these mutants for different things. He manufactures a series of robots called Spider Slayers that originally were set to stop people who were infected, like capture them, but then later on in the game he goes haywire and basically starts doing whatever he wants, attacking Spider-Man with them and stuff like that. So that's the basic plot of the game. End of spoilers, okay? So those are the spoiler times. I'm not going to really try to spoil anymore during the course of the review. So really, what ends up happening in Amazing Spider-Man is you have an open new world New York, and you have a lot of things that you can do. You can save civilians who have been infected and grab them off the street and bring them to a hospital. That's a side mission. You could save some of the, or actually recover some of the inmates who escaped the mental asylum when you break out Dr. Connors at the beginning of the game. That's another side mission. You can help the police in several different endeavors, like holdups and street chases and stuff like that. Those are different side missions, okay? In addition to that, there's just fun side stuff, like doing races across the city, hitting certain points during the course of this racing, posing for the camera, and your job is to keep the camera lined up with Peter, and also collecting comic books. The collectibles in this game are comic books. Really all they are is Amazing Fantasy #1, which was the first comic book that Spider-Man was ever in. That comic book there's 700 of them hidden throughout this New York City. I mean, obviously, so you say 700, how could there be that many? Well, the bottom line is there aren't. What happens is a lot of the times you'll get the comic book, and then when you come back later in the game, it's respawned, and you pick up the same comic book again. And as you do these things, these side missions, you accumulate experience. Experience allows you to unlock new abilities for Peter. So it might be, you have better armor, you do more damage with your attack, stuff like that. As you also progress through the game, you're going to fight different robots and find different items hidden that are called tech items. And as you accumulate these the tech points, you can increase your web ability. So maybe instead of just shooting web, now you can shoot twice as fast. Maybe your web keeps someone, stuck longer. Some of the best abilities in the game are the abilities to grab stuff and throw them with your web, to slingshot yourself at an enemy and hit them while you're doing it so that you can disable them. There's a lot of things you can upgrade in this game. At the beginning of the game you feel kind of powerful, but you'll find that there are certain enemy types, such as the snipers that are on the rooftops looking for Spider-Man, that may seem like unbeatable, but as you progress in the game, you do more story missions and side missions, you'll gain more experience, you'll get better abilities, and those abilities allow you significantly to beat these opponents a lot more easier, okay? The combat of Spider-Man, or Amazing Spider-Man, is extremely similar to the Batman games up to now, Batman Arkham Asylum and Batman Arkham City. You've got your basic melee attack, and of course you've got your web attack, which is the projectiles. As you're fighting, you're going to have other enemies coming up to hit you, to which you see a spider sense above your head. When you see that, press the reversal button, just like in Arkham City. You'll dodge the attack in reverse, and now you can continue to fight enemies. Now later on, there end up being enemies that you can't just beat with regular melee attacks. You need to beat them until you get a certain string of hits. Let's say it's 10 hits in a row without being hit by an opponent. And once you do that, then you can do what's called a web, it's not an execution, but it's like a web finisher, where you tie them up with web and then they're considered defeated. So there is some advancement in the combat as the game progresses. Later on, there are enemies with ranged weapons that are going to hit you no matter what. So it's your job to try to take them out as quickly as possible, kind of zipping around between them with your web, so that they're all aiming, and they can't really get a beat on you. There are tougher enemies where you're going to have to jump behind them, similarly to Batman Arkham City again, where a guy with a shield or whatever, you have to go behind him and then hit him from behind in order to finally beat him. So there is some variety in the melee combat, and it does progress and actually become more complex as the game goes along, very similarly to Arkham City. So, open world, really cool combat structure, and unlockable abilities. Three things, all draw extreme parallels to Batman Arkham City, and they're all really good stuff, okay? some of the negatives that I have to say about the game is, number one, unfortunately, you know, it's the Amazing Spider-Man. It's a movie tie-in, and what that means is you're going to be limited to things that are in this movie lore universe. Yes, there are some additional enemies like Rhino, like who's the other one? Vermin. And these are mainstream Spider-Man villains, classic Spider-Man villains. But the problem is they're confined into this movie universe, and so they get really weird explanations of why they're there or who they are. Like Vermin and Rhino are just these mutants that are spin-offs of Spider-Man and the Lizard. And it's because of Dr. Connor's research that these mutants even exist. And it's like, wait a minute, that's nothing like what it was in the comics. Nothing at all. And it's kind of like they're writing in a way for these characters to be in the game even though they weren't in the movies. Or in the movie, I guess I should say, since this is the series reboot. And so it's good, the story is good, don't get me wrong, and the story of the game you could probably beat within roughly, I'd say, 6 to 8 hours if you're just doing the story and no side missions, but it is confined to only a very small cast of characters. You've got Spider-Man, you've got his love interest, Gwen Stacy, who works for Alistair Smythe, and you've got Dr. Connors. And outside of those 4 main characters, there's a couple other side characters, including a reporter who you help out during the course of the game by sneaking in and taking pictures of things that are going on at Oscorp, and she gets stories out of it. She really is not a main character, and it's just kind of something added in for side content. There's also Bruce Campbell is in the game. He plays a helicopter pilot who works for this like extreme TV station. He wants you to do extreme things like do web races around the city. Again, like I said, you can pose, you do amazing poses, and you have a video feed of that, and it's just side content. It's just side characters that really have nothing to do with the plot. The main plot literally is 4 characters, and no one ever really gets involved in the plot. So the main plot of the game itself is kind of limited. It's good, it's interesting, but it is very limited in what it is, because you're limited to things that have happened in the movie universe so far, and obviously they're not going to start introducing all these new characters and such if maybe they're going to be in future movies, you know what I mean? There are some annoying game bugs. There were times during the game when you'll be fighting 10 dudes at once, and a guy will be off screen. You can't see him, so you don't know you need to reverse because this guy's about to attack, and he'll just hit you from behind. And there were a lot of times in the game when I was fighting multiple enemies where the camera would pan into a weird way, and a guy would sneak attack me from behind, and I would die, and that would be really annoying. There were a couple times when I got stuck inside of objects, like a building. I would be inside of it, and luckily I was able to find ways to unstick myself, either by using the different movement techniques or whatever. The biggest game bug for me in this game was the end of the game, and if you saw my playthrough and you watched the last part, you'll know what I'm talking about. I literally just beat this game 20 minutes ago, okay? Now I'm doing the review. What happens after the game is it saves a chapter 13, because the end of the game is really chapter 12. You get all your achievements for beating the game. Chapter 13 is supposed to be that Gwen and Peter are at the apartment together, and you can go out into the game world and continue to do side missions that you didn't complete. Maybe there are actually hidden outfits in this game, hidden costumes, so maybe you want to go out and find the spider emblems that are hidden throughout the game and take pictures of them so that you can unlock those costumes. But my game never allowed me to do so, and I don't know what the deal is, but I can't. Right now, it's stuck at the loading screen after you beat the game. So when I actually beat the game, it just stuck there and never completed the final game save, so I was never able to go back to the open world and continue my side quests like I wanted to. And that's a shame, because I had 699 out of the 700 comic books in the game. I was that close to getting an achievement. I was only a couple missions away from getting some of the achievements for the side missions, because I'd done most of the side missions in my playthrough. And so after it didn't load, I said, let me reload the game. So I quit the game, reloaded it. It started me back at the final stage of the game. I had to do the final boss fight completely over again. And then I said, okay, maybe it'll be worth it. No, because again, right now, I'm not even kidding you, it's on my TV, because I was waiting to see maybe if I just leave it on for a long time, it would fix itself. It's not. It's now been on for 30 minutes, and it still says loading, loading, loading. So my game, for whatever reason, has a bug at the end that doesn't save the open world where you can go back and do your side missions. I have no clue what's going on. That's a really annoying game bug that should have been figured out and fixed, because now I'm basically fucked. I can never go back to my game and play it again, because whenever I hit continue, it goes back to the final boss fight, and then it just locks up loading after all the credits and everything, which is really fucking annoying. That's just my experience. I'm sure other people didn't have that. I'm getting that. I don't know why. That really annoys me. But outside of that, really the only complaints that I have is that some of the side missions are very repetitive, okay? Obviously they wanted to add additional content to the game by giving you all this side content in New York. You don't just have to do these main story missions. You can swing throughout the city and do all the side content, like picking up these comic books, like saving infected citizens, like getting the inmates that escaped from the mental hospital when you broke out Dr. Connors at the beginning of the game. You know, all these things, they're rewarding because they give you experience and you can level your character up a lot more, and it's obviously the game becomes easier the more abilities you have. But it is very repetitive and tedious, to which some people actually started leaving comments saying, listen, for 2 entire parts, Phil, you've just been doing repetitive side content. I'm going to skip ahead till I see another story part. And I can understand that. For a playthrough, you're probably going to get bored watching someone do the repetitive stuff. But that being said, it adds a significant amount of content. And let me give you some perspective here. This game, okay, is roughly, when it comes down to it, my playthrough, I believe, was around 13 to 14 hours long. But I did most of the side content. I was almost to the point where I would have unlocked all the achievements for completing all of the side content. You could probably beat the story of this game, as I said, in 6 to 8 hours, but undoubtedly you're going to want to do some of the side content. In fact, there are a couple unique side content missions that are very fun. There's one where you actually run into Felicia, Felicia Hardy, who is the Black Cat. Now in this game, she's not yet the Black Cat, she's just a criminal. And she escaped from the mental facility also when you broke out Dr. Connors at the beginning of the game, and she robs a bank. And so it's your job as Peter to go through and disarm all the criminals, and then go find her, and then there's a big chase sequence where you have to go after her, and then a final boss fight, and you beat her, and you get an achievement, and the story progresses because you've done this. And those are the kind of really cool things that are side content that are added to the game, and they really do add significant story progression and content to the game that really they didn't have to put in there. So with all the side content, if you end up doing all the fun stuff, you could probably get up to 14 hours out of this game, which is really neat. 14 hours of gameplay out of a $60 game, and it's a movie tie-in. How often do you see movie tie-in games that are this good, okay? So overall, The Amazing Spider-Man, a fun game. First of all, if you're a fan of Spider-Man, you're going to love it. A return back to the open-world, web-swinging gameplay of New York City, you're going to love that fact, okay? Amazing amount of side content, albeit some of it's repetitive, but it is an amazing amount of content. You definitely get your bang for your buck with this game. The only limitations, a couple annoying game bugs here and there, and the fact that unfortunately you are limited to the movie universe, and there is only one movie. That is annoying. You know, you would love to see, oh, where's Electro and where's Sandman? They're not in this yet because maybe they're going to be in the series later. They didn't put them in. So it is annoying that you didn't really see that. All they tried to do really is try to throw in a couple handful of extra villains like Rhino or Vermin, who they could try to write into this movie storyline of, oh, there's mutations and they're just mutants, okay? So a little annoying on that front. I think they could have done more with this game if it wasn't Amazing Spider-Man. If this were just an open world Spider-Man game, they could have brought in 100 different villains. They could have a million boss fights. And that being said, there are some really good boss fights in the game. I don't want anyone to get turned off and think that there's not. Sometimes you're fighting giant robotic spider slayers. There are multiple level boss fights. Those are fun. Sometimes you're fighting the mutants, and different mutants have different abilities that change the way that those boss fights go. So, yeah, there are a lot of interesting boss fights in the game, but it would have been cool to have a wider cast of Spider-Man characters that they could have drawn upon, which they couldn't do because it's a movie license. So, for what it is, I definitely recommend Amazing Spider-Man as a purchase, especially if you're a fan of Spider-Man, you're going to love it. If you're a fan of Batman Arkham City, you're going to love this game because it's a very similar style of gameplay and content. And I definitely recommend to buy. I think the game is good enough that Beenox did a great enough job. They redeemed themselves after the really shitty Spider-Man Edge of Time last fall. They made a great game here, and it's definitely worth a buy. So, The Amazing Spider-Man, this might surprise some people, ties in my mind for my favorite game this year. I give Amazing Spider-Man an 8.5 out of 10. Didn't quite reach the levels of greatness that Batman Arkham City did because it was limited to the movie universe, and I really think that that held the game back a bit. And it does have some annoying game bugs that held it back a bit. But for what it is, it's a great game. This game, I feel, is just as good as Mass Effect 3 and The Darkness 2, which so far this year are my two favorite games. I think this ties with them. So, definitely one of my favorite games of the year so far. Check it out if you get a chance. Amazing Spider-Man. Great job by Beenox. Really good game. Okay, so that's it for the Hateful Truth review for Amazing Spider-Man. I hope that you found there was a lot of truth and no bullshit in that review for you. I hope you now have a lot more knowledge of what's going on in the game, and that you can actually go out and decide whether or not you want to buy it or not. Again, you love these kind of open world action games, you're going to love this game. So go check it out. If you were on the fence about it, it's definitely worth it. A lot of people said to me, Phil, what's this? What's better, Amazing Spider-Man or Spider-Man Web of Shadows? To which I say, it's kind of hard for me to answer that, because Web of Shadows, again, wasn't limited to the movie universe, and we're able to draw upon many other characters from the Marvel universe, like Wolverine was in there, you know, Venom was in there. And so because of that, obviously, it was kind of neat. And in addition to that, there were morality choices in that game. That was kind of the gimmick with that game. You could replay it a couple of times and get different achievements and morality choices. You don't get that in this game, but I think the game's graphical style is better than Web of Shadows by far. The story's really good. I don't know. I think they're two different kinds of Spider-Man game. I think that this being a movie tie-in, this is probably, you know, almost perfect. There are a couple annoying bugs that I think brought the game down, and again, I think they could have done better with the plot. Only having 4 characters and being limited to that, it was very limited. But really good game. Check it out. Amazing Spider-Man, one of my favorite games. Actually ties so far as my favorite game this year. Thanks a lot. I'll see you guys next time on the Hateful Truth Game Review Series. Peace.